We have a quorum, so we'll get started. Welcome to the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. We're going to start by having Senator Cowser open us up with a word of prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let us pray. Lord, thank you for letting us participate in this democratic process where we can all be heard and use our talents and knowledge and intelligence to try to solve the problems of the state of Georgia. Help us continue to be civil with one another and always keep you in the forefront of our mind and behave as you would like for us to. In God's name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Senator Cowser. Before we get started, I'm going to ask Senator Hatchett if he wants to introduce our judge of the day since he's from up in his neck of the woods. Are you Mike 12? Go ahead.
Yeah, we're honored today to have Judge Chan Caldell from the Mountain Judicial Circuit from Cornelia, Georgia, and lives right down the street from me. Glad to have you here, Judge.
Thank you, Judge. Oh, we got some class. Wow. Our first judge of the day, I think, this session, unless I just missed the others, which I may have. So good to have you, as always, join us up here. All right, we have 3 bills on the agenda, as always. If you want to be heard in a bill, please sign up. We have the forms up here. And we're going to start in order with Senate Bill 378. Senator Harbin, if you want to come up. And we are working off of LC 491562. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My first time to be before the Judiciary. I feel like I'm in court with as many lawyers as we have here, but a good friendly and almost a good left-hander I always have in the chamber that's there to keep me straight, so I appreciate that. I want to talk just a little bit about what brought me here. 4th of July, there was a major release of a movie called Sound of Freedom. It outperformed Indiana Jones. It outperformed Mission Impossible. And it was a story about something that I'd never really thought about, and that was child sex trafficking. And if you read it or see it, it is probably the most moving movie I have ever been a part of to watch. I've watched it 3 times because it's the true story of a man, Tim Ballard, who is in the breaking up the child sex trafficking rings that are around the country. And I never realized how deep it really is. Almost seems to be like it's an area of the world that we don't look at. His one statement I think that has stuck in my mind is this: God's children are not for sale. The United States of America is the top destination for child sex trafficking, and it's happening in Georgia. And SB 378, sentencing requirements for offenses of trafficking individuals for sexual servitude, I believe is a deterrent to help just a starting point to make that happen. One of the things we are seeing is this in our own cities, Peachtree City. 3 years ago, there was a sting operation. And every 30 minutes, they were acting as a 14-year-old. Every 30 minutes, they had someone coming in thinking they were meeting a 14-year-old. Right now, the biggest issues that we are dealing with are the border. The border has much more of an effect on us than we think it does. There are 85,000 undocumented children that have come across the border. And the cartels would rather have children than drugs because they can be used over and over and over. There's also an issue of social media where they are desiring to draw people in. They are being used for pornography, and that is another area that this whole area is about. But in 2018, the statistical data said that 51.6% of criminal human trafficking involved children. Half of all sex trafficking is involving children. I believe that there is a need to make it where the squeeze is not worth the juice. The penalty needs to be high. And if someone is convicted of child sex trafficking, there should be a consequence that is a deterrent to what goes on. And what SB 378 does, and I'll read and you read as well, is the bill extracts this offense of trafficking an individual under the age of 18 or with developmental disabilities for sexual servitude and makes it a separate felony offense. This offense will be punished by a term of imprisonment and a maximum fine of $250,000, and the term of imprisonment shall either be for life or for a minimum of 30 years, followed by a lifetime of probation accompanied by electronic monitoring. I believe that there is a need to send a message. I was at a showing of Sound of Freedom at Trilith Studios, and there were testimonies given that even in Atlanta, that on any given weekend, there are 300 children that are available on the dark web here, even in our city. And I believe we need to find a way to say, if you're convicted, you're going to spend time in jail. That's not going to be simple. It's going to be hard time. And I believe that we need to do this. This is a starting point of what we need to do to stop this atrocity, to stop this evil. Because when you take a child, and I have 6 children and 11 grandchildren, I cannot think of anything. And the average child is used up to 20 times a day at a cost of $90 per trick. That, in my opinion, is unhuman and unthinkable. And I believe we need to make the penalty as tough as we can make it for the children that are here in Georgia, and we need to send this across the country with what's going on right now is what's coming across our borders as well. And for that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any questions for the author of the bill? There are a few people that want to speak on the bill. We'll take questions for the author first. Senator Setzler. Are you Mike 11? All right. Senator Setzler.
I'm just reading on section 1 of the bill, the line 15, person commits to trafficking an individual for labor servitude. It says, or sexual servitude. The sexual servitude is stricken, that language is stricken. And then, is there any reason for that, or is that, what's the?
That was how
Yeah, because the next page increases the
penalties.
So you took it, the originally under the law, as you see there, it's the same penalty for labor servitude and sexual servitude, and his bill then spells out a different penalty under B for sexual servitude.
Okay. I got you. Thank you.
Okay.
Senator Jones?
Mr. Chair.
All right.
I'm with.
Two questions. Number one is the code. What code section we're using when we define developmental disability? If you know, on page 2, line 22, because it also says who has a developmental disability. So I'm just curious how we're defining that.
That was given to me by Ledge Counsel.
Okay.
Can I refer to him on
Sure.
that if I can?
Absolutely.
Oops.
Is it?
It's actually the code section 37-1-1. Yeah.
And it's a combination, I think, of 3 potential factors. Okay, I was just making sure we was on the same page with that. And then number 2, so are we basically just giving life with parole or life without parole? The way this is kind of structured.
Life or 30 years is the minimums that are there. One of the two as far as that. And then if he's 30 years and he's out, he's going to be monitored all of his life for the rest of his life.
So is it a guaranteed jail sentence? Is that what we're saying for life?
That's what we're looking for.
Okay.
Is that if they're convicted, they are either life in prison or they're 30 years.
Okay. That's all I have.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, we will, if you want to have a seat behind there, we'll call up the 3 people all speaking for the bill. First up is Mike Griffin with Georgia Baptist. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you to Mr. Chairman. My name is Mike Griffin. I'm the Public Affairs Representative with the Georgia Baptist Mission Board, and we do represent up to 1.5 million Georgians with 3,400 churches. I've been down here about my 17th year. Me and Senator Cowser, we go back to 2006 where we met. He ran for Senate, I ran for House. I didn't make it, but he did. But anyway.
Who turned out better off?
Yeah, well, he did. but we're good friends, and we work together on a lot of things. Not only do I deal with public affairs and down here and social moral issues, but also deal with child protection policy. Georgia Baptist really were, I think, the only major denomination that supported the Hidden Predator Act going back to 2015. So we've been right in the middle of a lot that's been going on with kids. And I have been with Commissioner Tim Eccles on at least 5 what we call unholy tours, where we go around the metro area and we have victims as well as advocates that are on that bus with us talking about what's going on in the area of sex trafficking. And it's a very major problem here in the Atlanta area and in Georgia. And Georgia Baptists have an organization called Mission Georgia that has 5 particular areas that we work on, and one of them is human trafficking that we want to work on as a Georgia Baptist Mission Board. And one of the things we work on is education. We work toward prevention, and of course we do support legislation that deals with punishment, because we definitely want to do whatever we can to discourage this industry here in our state. And so we do support this legislation. We appreciate Senator Harbin for bringing it up, and we would ask for your favorable support of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Griffin? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Taylor Hawkins with Frontline Policy. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Taylor Hawkins with Frontline Policy Council, and I am here to offer our full endorsement of Senate Bill 378. Over the past couple of years, as we have worked on different pieces of legislation dealing with human trafficking, a number of committees, both your committee, sir, as well as Judiciary in the House, have heard compelling testimony from witnesses that we facilitated, as well as individuals working for Street Grace here in Georgia who have testified to the positive impact of increasing mandatory minimums. And I think with the recent attention brought to child trafficking, as well as the fact that it has frighteningly gone up as opposed to down in recent years, I think it would be appropriate at this time to enact this legislation to increase those mandatory minimums. We think it would have a positive impact. We are convinced that the methodologies that criminals use to discuss different states and the underground networks that they use to communicate with one another, that there's compelling evidence to support the fact that they use that as a basis of where they base their operations, where they increase their operations. And so there is, as I say, evidence to suggest that this could have an impact. And we think that our state should do everything possible to stop the heinous crime of human child sex trafficking. So we do support the bill, and we ask for your favorable consideration.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Any questions from the committee? All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
And last up, Juliana McConnell with, is it the Preston Group?
Is it this one?
They both should be hot.
Okay. Thank you. I'm here actually today to speak on behalf of 2 separate organizations through the Preston Group. And the first is Street Grace, which has been mentioned. And I've been working with them since they were created back in 2009. And Street Grace has been very strong and working and fighting against the commercial sexual exploitation of our children. In fact, with Grace standing for Galvanizing Resources Against Child Exploitation. We've actually Street Grace has now even expanded, from Georgia into several other states, and Tennessee and Texas, and about to expand to another one. So we certainly support this legislation. And then also I represent the Commission on Women, and we have 15 commissioners, and this was created back in 1992, and I've had the honor of serving on that commission and since that time. And our main focus right now is women and children's health care and sex trafficking, fighting sex trafficking. We have several of our commissioners who actually serve on the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council's statewide task force and their statewide coalition, and have the opportunity to work directly with them and the First Lady as we fight against this the sexual exploitation of our children, and certainly work with them on, we've come a long way from some of the worst laws in the nation back when we first started to now we actually have, I feel like, model laws. Y'all have done a great job of passing legislation over the years to strengthen our laws, but we continue, there still needs to be work done, and until we make the penalty strong enough where it discourages and to the point of what this legislation does, we certainly think it's quite appropriate. And so we ask for your favorable consideration, and thank you for allowing me to address you today. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. McConnell. You said it well. I remember when I first came in the House years ago now, you didn't really talk about human trafficking, and there's a lot of people that didn't believe it was even happening. And then over the years, when we finally started creating criminal laws around this, we started really embracing the victims and making sure we're helping people get out of this system. And now with this bill, we're kind of circling back and going back into our criminal law. So I just appreciate you and your organizations being there from day one, and as we continue this battle in our state.
Thank you. And it was mentioned about the Unholy Tour, and just this morning I was at a breakfast and Commissioner Tim Eccles was there, and he told me that he is again this year. He asked us, in fact, if we would help him in coordinating and hosting another Unholy Tour. So if you have not had an opportunity to participate in that, I strongly encourage you. We'll be sending out information on the date of that, where we have a bus and we'll take the legislators outside and pick you up and take you on into some of the areas that's just absolutely eye-opening. And we also have on board with us some victims that we have brought out of their life and to help. So it will, and Senator Strickland, I'll certainly let you know when that date is, since we'll be working with him to coordinate that effort.
Thank you.
Okay, again, thank you.
All right, no questions from the committee. That's everyone that signed up to speak on the bill. What's the pleasure of the committee? Motion to pass by Senator Kennedy. Do we have a second? Second from Senator Hatchett. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 9. I have 9 opposed. 1. Motion carries. Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Majority Leader.
It's great to be back again.
I'm glad you came back again.
Came to learn.
Now, you had a press conference earlier. Did you go to one of those places where they blow dry your hair and get you ready for that, or?
Hair dryer. I prefer hair dryer.
Okay. Make sure you go now.
In the mountains, we just stick our head out the window.
Right.
Drive down the road.
Right. All right. Next.
Make sure the majority leader has a pad to take the notes.
Yeah, we can. Hey, Christian, he already has a pad. Okay. We're making sure that the majority leader can take notes while he's here. And also, if you see anything you think is unconstitutional or any issues in the law that you notice while you're here, I hope you'll speak up. What's your mic number?
Number
4. Okay. You have something now?
I'm not good in Latin. I'm still working on English, but mostly Appalachian. But we're getting there.
That's where Latin comes from, actually.
Oh, really?
That's what I've heard.
Wow.
All right. Back on the agenda, Senate Bill 392. Senator Albers, first time in Judiciary for you as well?
First time today, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay. And we are working off a substitute. 50, you already knew, I couldn't remember. I couldn't read the handwriting. LC 560084S. Is that what you have?
Yes, sir, I sure do.
All right, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I want to talk for just a brief moment about artificial intelligence. Most of us have seen this really explode in the last 1 to 2 years as we've seen tools like ChatGPT and other things that are ringing through the markets and organizations. And this is a very large leap in innovation, and probably bigger than anything we will see in our lifetime. Some people might think this is a disruptor. And a disruptor, as an example, is when Uber came out versus taxi cabs. Or when we first got maybe an iPhone and got away from the BlackBerry at a touchscreen. Or even those of us who remember when the internet first arrived. This is more like when the wheel was invented. This is going to change every fabric or every part of our lives. And with that, it will bring wonderful innovations, and it will solve some of our biggest problems. This will literally be the tool that will likely cure cancer and other things that ail us, but also has the potential to do serious harm. This issue is bipartisan. It's going to impact businesses, government, individuals, friends, neighbors, charities, and we want to make sure as a state we have proper guardrails put in place, because we don't want to stifle that innovation, but at the same time we want to have protections in place. And in one of those areas specifically that we're all very familiar with is in the elections process. And as we talk about this bill, which is protecting against deepfake technology to influence Georgia elections, I'm going to take you through this bill. It's not that large of a bill, but I want you to understand what this potential impact could be. I also, I tell everyone when we have artificial intelligence committee meetings, this is a tip. You and your family need to have a code word. Don't tell me, don't ever email it, and don't ever text it. But you need that code word, because at some time in the future, there's a pretty good chance that someone who looks like your son or daughter, your spouse, your mother or father, you're going to get a FaceTime call from them, and it's going to come from their number, and it's going to be them. It's going to look just like them, and it's going to sound just like them. And there may be somebody with a gun to their head saying, if you don't wire me $10,000, I'm going to kill them. And everything about that will look real, but it's not. And without having something that you can distinguish it, will let you very quickly be able to hang up that phone and contact that person directly. If not, then you may have to get with the authorities and make a unfortunate decision in your life of how you're going to handle that. But this is very real, and it is available today. And that's what's called generative AI. So there are different types of artificial intelligence, but generative AI says, I want to take a picture or a video of somebody, and I want to use that in their voice to actually make it look like a real person. You've seen some of this in the movies, but it wasn't necessarily done by a computer so much. It was done by individuals coding and making it happen. Now it can literally be done by the power of large models and computer systems. Many of you probably heard during the New Hampshire primary, there was a robocall that went out of someone using President Biden's voice in a robocall. It actually was his voice. It wasn't someone who was mocking him. It was the computer generating of his voice, but it was not his words. We have seen this in races from local city council and county commission already, school board, all the way up to state and national races. This will be a part of the 2024 election cycle and everyone moving forward. Mark my words. And this will, the reason why I bring this bill is we need to get in front of this now in order to protect the integrity of people trying to influence these elections. So let me take you through this. There are obviously the typical setup of this bill of what the definitions are. A deep fake is a bill that we actually had several years ago. Our current labor commissioner, then Senator Bruce Thompson, passed a bill about doing deep fakes specifically to protect young people. There's a lot of that happening where they're superimposing different folks together in unfortunate positions and scenarios. But it talks about video recordings, video files, sound recording, electronic images, photographs in its entirety. And then what it basically does, if you continue through this bill, and I'm not going to read every line to you, is it talks about it making this illegal to use those and specifically say what the person's not doing to deceive you in order to then impact the credibility and influence the change of the election. Right? This is not a meme of somebody that you got texted to or you saw on Facebook or Instagram that's funny. Right? This is made where somebody's specifically trying to do something to deceive the electorate and change the way that they're going to vote. It puts this in as a crime, as a felony. You can read through that. And thanks to some great feedback from several people, some of you on the committee, the reason why you're seeing a substitute today is we added injunctive relief into the bill, and you'll see that beginning on line 51. We're going to have a lot more bills relating to artificial intelligence that you're going to see this year, and I think they're going to be very bipartisan. I think they're going to be a great opportunity for us to come together as a state. We like to tout often that we want to be we are the number one place to do business. If we're not the #1 state for artificial intelligence, we can no longer be the #1 state for business in the near future. So with that, I will pause and ask for any questions.
Questions for Chairman Albers? Senator Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at line 37, and I just want to preface it by saying that the intent of the bill, I'm 100% in favor for, because it is a serious issue. My only question, though, is on creates. How do we enforce that one? Because they haven't published it or anything. All they've done is created it. So I'm just curious, how do we actually enforce that one? Or does it require a publication? Does it require a creation and a publication requirement?
Well, with the intent to deceive people. So let's say I'm working with a group of people in a campaign office, an example, and I created this. Well, the guy or gal next to me may have said, oh, that looks great. Let's go ahead and publish that, right? So I think that's really getting back to why are people doing this to begin with if they're doing it with the intent to do harm.
Also, can I have one more follow-up, Mr. Chair? And I'm sure you have. Some other states did like a disclaimer. Did you kind of look into that, or is your goal basically just to do the outright ban and not get into the disclaimer kind of language?
That's a great question. We've actually had that discussion. In fact, Senator Parent and I were texting about that just a little bit earlier. At least I thought it was her.
Exactly.
You'll never know.
But I think it makes more sense to ban it, because what happens in having a disclosure like we've all seen, right? You see the picture, and then there's a little tiny disclosure on the bottom. And I'm afraid that the average person is not going to read the tiny little disclosure like that really fast guy that talks on the radio after the great deal is done, or when you see a commercial for some type of a pharmaceutical. At the end, you get that very quick snapshot. I'm afraid people won't pay attention to that. Now, one of the bills we're working on that probably will be in the next legislative session in 2025 will talk about watermarking. And watermarking is going to be something that Microsoft and Amazon and a lot of the big players are working on in order to assure digital images are going to be just that, right? They're going to be watermarked by who the owner is and if it was in any way modified. So I think that technology is coming along. I think right now just outright banning it is the smarter play, but I do think we're going to open that up in the future. Thank you.
Any other questions for the author of the bill? Senator Setzler.
I knew I couldn't get away with that one question, Ed.
Yeah, that's right. I actually had, I'm only going to ask 2. I actually had 5, but I won't ask them all. But I mean, I just, this big policy, this is important. I mean, this is a real issue. I get that. I'm concerned, as you explore this, putting some brackets around reducing a candidate's chance of being elected, and what the definition really is of deep fake. We think about these deep, high-tech, sort of impossible to not be able to diagnose fakes, that even many technical reviewers couldn't distinguish. I mean, the way you've got deep fake defined here, I mean, any Photoshop job that's a decent Photoshop job qualifies as a deep fake. And I don't know if that's your intention, but it does in this.
If you took all those things combined, right, with the intent to deceive the electorate, and then that specific ad or whatever you did was made in order to try to sway the election, then yeah, absolutely. The difference now is it's taken to a all new level, right? What can be done now is so very different, because if you see a TV commercial and that person looks just like me, right, and it sounds just like me, heck, it must be me, and I'm saying something that's so out of bounds with the people that I'm trying to represent in an election, that's a lot more impactful than, again, by somebody just doing a meme of somebody, as an example.
I mean, and the reason I ask is, I mean, the scale that we're talking about, and if someone were to do a deep fake and publish it in a statewide election, they were to do a $250,000, $400,000, $500,000 ad buy with a deep fake that said, hey, this is something that candidate, that the statewide candidate did. That's one thing. This definition is a college kid doing a deep fake and sending it around to his Facebook friend. Hey, look, I got this photo. Can you believe what Joe Biden did? While that shouldn't be okay, is that a 1 to 5 felony? I mean, I think there's a sense of scale of this and a danger of this we got to be mindful of. And I don't want to say that's okay behavior, but this is creating a 1 to 5 felony for somebody who's a rank amateur at a really low level influencing other people to vote no for Joe Biden or no against Donald Trump, whatever the case would be. I just think there's got to be a level of proportion that I don't see here. My mind goes there.
Yeah, I think, again, if you look at the language of this, of what they're doing, you're beginning on line 36 and moving down, right? This is for the intent to deceive people, right? It's not that I just got this handed to me, and it's also trying to change the chance of them being elected and influencing the result of an election or of a referendum, right? This is, I don't draw the exact parallel. This is kids. All right, this is typically groups. By the way, they're not typically even the candidate groups doing this. It tends to be the third parties, right, that pretend, I think, sometimes that they do or do not want to help a certain group of people. I hope this will also help with the media companies who have a responsibility to be looking and checking in stuff well to say, are you violating the law by sending this to us? And I hope that they're going to do a much better job, because I think in the advent of mass media in electronic form, and especially with social media, we've perverted this process. And we need to bring some type of sanity back to it. And I think this is a good step in the right direction.
And I asked the question, Mr. Chairman, because I think the problem is a problem that needs to be solved. I just don't know. Does a 1 to 5 felony do it? Do you get more traction having some injunctive relief power that gets you to the courtroom quicker, faster, before it can be proliferated? Is there another mechanism that's more powerful in this that you can interdict this from having its effect? I mean, let's say it happens, and let's say, John Albert's running for governor, and you pick the year, and it's someone comes in and it has its effect, and you'll be able to get a conviction after the fact, but it's after the fact. You don't get to relitigate the election if it's happening, 3 weeks out. It would seem to me, if I were given the choice to be able to bring a felony prosecution against somebody or to have some accelerated consideration for injunctive relief, that seems like a way more powerful tool in affecting electoral outcomes. And I mean, I'm just, and perhaps at some level, this rises to a level of fraud, in essence, that you do then get a felony treatment, but I don't know that it really solves the problem like we want to. And I just, passing the bill, I don't know that solves it, and I think when you think about the lower end of the fact pattern, when you've got a college kid or some creep that's eating, staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning eating pizza in his parents' basement, living off his parents, and doing nothing but just creating political chaos on the internet, doing deep fakes and sending it around to outcome. That's a bad behavior, and we don't want to say that's okay. But is it the same as a campaign that at statewide scale spends major dollars behind something to really outcome an election in a decisive way? I don't know. I mean, I'm concerned about this myself, honestly, but I don't know that we're really solving the problem with this. The injunctive relief thing catches, I love that piece. I just think we need to discuss this some more. And I do have one other question, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman.
If I could answer
Sure.
Chairman Setzer's question. Like anything else in the judiciary system, I think that if this gets before a judge and there is a prosecutor there, they'll probably sit down and come to some types of terms, because we know that most of these never get to a full trial, right? They work out whatever the punishment is going to be ahead of time. So I have faith in our system, and I think it works really well, that they're going to find a right answer to those that are doing something at a large scale or a lesser scale. But the sad part is, in our day and age, Mr. Chairman, you can do just as much in your parents' basement as a 35-year-old's unemployed as you could do working on the 40th floor of a midtown tower working for a high-tech company today. That's the unfortunate, scary part of where we are, especially with AI, and why we need to make sure that we're doing this in a way that will make sure folks know that there is such a severe penalty. You would never want to do this.
But would you agree that a Facebook post is materially different, even though it can go viral, but a Facebook post is materially different than a $100,000 plus ad buy that goes out in a state Senate campaign? I'm just trying to see if those weigh the same.
So it's not necessarily different, because then, as an example, You could have a post on Facebook or X, which is formerly Twitter, that could be picked up and it could be magnified millions and millions of times if it just went off the right way. They could actually get more media attention than that 100,000 person mailer or TV buy. So in today's day and age, again, that's why we need to have something in place because you just never know what's going to get picked up by it.
Senator Rhett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it easy to track down the perpetrators?
That's a great question, Senator. The answer is no. It's not easy at all. In fact, it's very challenging sometimes because the folks that create any type of cyber criminal acts try to cover their tracks very well. Thankfully, in all areas of law enforcement, federal, state, and local level, we're also getting better at going after those folks. We've seen that a lot with ransomware. And people being attacked by malware and other things. The good news about where they publish this information is, and this is going back to the tech companies that put it out there, is now you have to sign up and you have to put a lot of information before you can place those ads on a Facebook, on a Twitter, which is really how most of them go out. And if you use a large email system like a Constant Contact or a MailChimp or things of that nature, they have a lot more ways to pull that data than they used to be. But this is always going to be an ongoing battle of keeping up with the next round of bad actors. And sometimes this is also going to keep the average person from doing something they shouldn't. Right now, you can do it. So some people might think as a joke, very similar to all of us that got swatted a month ago. Some people just thought, well, this is funny. Well, it's not funny. It could be very severe. People could lose their lives, right? In this case, this could have a very negative impact, and we want to make sure people understand that there are consequences to bad actions.
Any other questions for the author of the bill? Senator Setzler.
Mr. Chairman, on line 45 through 47, were the deep fakes created by a candidate at their request or includes a depiction of that candidate? So I read this to be your intention is I could do a deep fake of myself. Mm-hmm. I could put myself on Chairman Strickland's physique and show myself as a tall, thin, good-looking guy with my face interposed on that for purposes of election outcomes, and that's okay, but you can't do this for another candidate? Is that your intention?
Yeah, so you can do something for yourself, right? Let's say that Senator Hatchett wanted to get a great video of him in his football star days, right? And he wanted to get himself back in the old uniform and scoring a touchdown. He could certainly do that because he's trying to highlight something that maybe he has done in the past that's very successful. I think it'll help blue voters. But that's their decision to do it on their campaign with their information.
So we could, so I could misrepresent facts materially and say I did something I didn't do. Now, obviously, if it's intended to be kind of representational, or hey, Bo Hatchett is 22 again, and you could make that into a sort of a fictitious representation that's fun that people could sort of understand as such. But I could create a circumstance where I'm actually in the well of the Senate doing something that I didn't do in the well, just something that's fake and intended to deceive and intended to represent that I did something that was noteworthy, and you're good.
Correct, because that is your First Amendment right at that point, right? You're not. You are just doing for yourself, just like a lot of people do in elections today. Unfortunately, some people have embellished their resume. In fact, I think someone got booted out of Congress recently for that and some other stuff. People could do that at their own risk.
Okay. All right, no other questions at this time. We have a few people who want to speak on the bill. We'll start with Sarah Hunt Blackwell with the ACLU of Georgia. If you want to move on back behind there, Chairman Albers.
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Come back anytime, though.
Oh, I will.
Yeah, I know you will. Good afternoon.
Right. Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Sarah Hunt Blackwell. It's good to see you all again for the second week in a row. I'm the First Amendment policy advocate with the ACLU of Georgia. I'd like to start by thanking Chairman Albers for introducing this bill as a means to help ensure safe and fair elections in Georgia. We believe that this bill has been introduced in good faith to directly address dangerous implications of AI technology. It is proactive and forward-thinking, especially given that we've entered a digital landscape that was likely unfathomable to the framers of our Constitution. This is uncharted territory, and we are all trying to navigate it in the best ways possible. The ACLU of Georgia shares the committee's concerns about disinformation and election interference, and First Amendment protections should be factored into state regulations on this matter. Navigating this delicate balance is critical. We've seen legislation similar to SB 392 in other states, most notably Minnesota and California. Those states addressed the same election interference concerns and drafted the bills to include necessary First Amendment carve-outs to avoid over-criminalization. Our first recommendation, taken from Minnesota's legislation, is to require clear and obvious disclaimers on deepfake posts, indicating that the content is AI generated. We see similar fact-check measures currently being applied on social media posts that feature misinformation. This is a strategy that could also be helpful in making people aware of AI-generated content about election candidates, but also allows people the range of free expression that is protected under the First Amendment. Our second recommendation is to include some exemptions based on established First Amendment case law. Bona fide media outlets generally have a First Amendment shield and should not face liability for sharing deepfake content as part of paid opportunities or legitimate news broadcasts. Social media companies also receive legal protection under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act against liability for content published by its users. Additionally, satire and parody are commonly used during elections as political speech. Satirical expressions are protected by the First Amendment and should not be prohibited unless there are threats of violence or national security. Our third and final recommendation is to reconsider the enforcement mechanism included in this bill. Injunctive relief and civil claims under tort law address the issues arising from deepfakes better than criminal penalties. Again, we thank Chairman Albers for introducing a sub that adds this language, but the criminal penalty is still concerning. Our other states' legislatures, like those in Minnesota and California, do not criminalize offenses related to deepfakes. Applying felony charges to the publication of online content sets an unnerving and excessive precedent that this body should avoid. The manufacturing of disinformation using AI is a serious issue that presents novel challenges. As we work through solutions, I ask this body to keep constitutional protections top of mind. We are happy to share copies of legislation from the other states and speak with members in detail to achieve protection in the fullest sense of the word. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the committee? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Cindy Battles of the People Agenda. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, committee, and to Chairman Albers. Thank you so much for addressing what I think we have all agreed is a really important issue in 2024. Luckily, I've had a chance to speak with a good number of the committee members and the sponsor of this bill. I agree with Sarah. I think it's brought forth in good faith. I think that my problem with the bill is it punishes after the fact. And I have some issues with the penalties as well, but that I'll get into. I really appreciate the fact that injunctive relief was included in the substitute. I haven't got to read it, but that was a big thing for us. The other thing that I'm going to strongly suggest, I'm sorry, I do believe that if we have some sort of disclosure on campaign ads, it's going to be important. Will everyone read that disclosure? I can't promise that they will, but we already have disclosures on campaign ads because we believe they're important. And I think that if we have disclosures on campaign ads, we're going to start training folks to kind of get an idea of what they're looking for, because you're going to be able to put those disclosures on campaign ads that you see on TV, not necessarily something you see on YouTube, but the idea is to get people to critically think about what they're looking at. So I think the disclosures, especially considering the fact this is 2024 and Chairman Albers said this bill that they're working on will be ready around 2025, I think that that's an important piece. You should have something, by the way, in your folders with some of these suggestions. So I will try and be as brief as possible because I know we have other things to do. I do believe that satire and that kind of thing should be exempt. And then with the penalties, I think that there should be different penalties in case of situations where they're trying to incite violence or bodily harm, or if they're just trying to get you to believe that Leader Hatchett played football when he was in college. You may have, I don't know, but you see what I'm saying. I'm just using that example because I do think that the penalty that's currently in the substitute goes too far. So I think those are the only suggestions I've had. I really appreciate everyone who's taken the time to talk to us in the past few days about this. Again, I think it's proactive. It helps. I think we're going to see a lot of misinformation and disinformation in 2024. AI is obviously going to be a part of that. I just think this bill could be more proactive in what it does.
All right, you do have some questions from the committee. Senator Parent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm looking at your handout that's in our folder. Thank you for providing this. Is this from another state statute, or can you elaborate on the source of this?
So a lot of this comes from sort of the same thing Sarah was talking about. We've used California, Minnesota as examples of what we could put in Georgia's bills to make this more specific and better in trying to prevent AI.
I thought I had read in the news recently, I know some other states are also looking at this, and was it New Mexico or Michigan? There's some other, are you aware of other states that are?
New York Times just did an article about a really good one, and I'm happy to send it to anyone who wants it. There's a number of states that are passing legislation to prevent AI, misinformation, and disinformation. So
you've kind of pulled some of
Yes.
these all together with this suggested language?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Senator Jones.
Mr. Chair. Also, I think that just as far as states are concerned, I think Indiana and also Florida also have that disclaimer language. But my question is, would there be any requirement, like legally, when we're talking about the disclaimer language, that language would have to be as small as we do now? Couldn't it be kind of enlarged and almost going across the ad to some extent? Because it is a fake ad.
Right.
So it could be something much larger disclaimer and really saying this is a deep fake. It doesn't have to be the small thing we do now. Would there correct? We could make it as large as we want within
Exactly.
the law. Okay. Thank
It
you.
would be almost similar to what SB 202 did when the third-party absentee ballot applications, where you specified the font, the size, that it needed to be in a color border or something of that nature, so that it is more noticeable.
On that note, are you proposing that we would have this disclaimer that if you put this on here, you would get immunity from criminal prosecution, or what? When do you think we should have the disclaimer? Because you wouldn't say I'm doing something illegal, and a disclaimer, obviously. What would be the purpose?
I believe that any campaign ad that is shown on any streaming service, TV, whatever, I believe that it should have this disclaimer on it. I think that when the criminal prosecution kicks in is when it's inciting violence, bodily harm, or it's a lie that negatively, it's disinformation. I don't know that misinformation would be
Right.
the same thing, but it's something where I'm deliberately lying on a candidate and using AI to generate evidence that that's happened.
So what would be the enforcement mechanism if you didn't do the disclaimer?
State Election Board?
Okay.
You've got it.
Senator Parent.
It looks like this language does have criminal penalties.
Yes.
Yes. So not more than 5 years, fine of not more than 10,000 or both. And then if it would cause violence or bodily harm, imprisonment of not more than 1 year or a fine of more than 3,000 or both.
Right.
and then other cases. So there are 3 levels of penalty in this particular language. Just
Right,
wanted to point that
because
out.
we're distinguishing between I want someone to set the Georgia State Capitol on fire, or I want to create a rumor about a candidate, right? And one of those would definitely be something that the GBI or law enforcement would handle, and one of those is something that the state election board would handle. It just depends on what the intent of the ad is.
Well, this first one contemplates repetitive violations, which is something worth thinking about, in my opinion.
All right, any other questions from the committee for Ms. Battles? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Robert Smith with the Prosecuting Attorneys Council, speaking in neutral on the bill, as always.
Happy first day of the session. Robert Smith with Prosecuting Attorneys Council, and basically I'm kind of here just to answer questions. If you have questions about the criminal side of this, I haven't seen the substitute, so I can't speak knowledgeably about that. One of the things I would point out, and it's kind of been asked, I think Senator Redd asked the question, is about the difficulties in prosecuting this. Under Georgia law, venue is where the crime takes place. So, for instance, if you have an ad that is published in all 159 counties, it would be a race to the courthouse to see which county the crime is prosecuted in. If we go with this law, some of you represent border counties. So an ad for a race in South Carolina or Tennessee or Alabama or Florida or North Carolina that is a deep fake that ends up being shown on a TV station or a radio station here in Georgia, or a Georgia resident hears it, we would have jurisdiction potentially under the statute to prosecute someone who has never stepped foot into Georgia, never had an intent to deep fake anyone in Georgia, but because it was heard by a resident in Georgia or viewed by a resident in Georgia, it potentially could be prosecuted here. And that goes not just, that's the traditional media. I don't have to begin to discuss with you, because each one of you is about to go through an election cycle, that elections are no longer done merely in print and traditional media. Campaign ads on Facebook, campaign ads on streaming services are now vital parts of an election cycle. And those ads as well are like vapors, and once released into the ether, are uncontrollable. And this is a felony crime. And I will also remind you that all prosecutors now in the state of Georgia are under a duty and a statutory obligation that when a crime or a potential crime has been committed, we have a duty to review it to determine whether or not probable cause exists for a prosecution of it. Did I speak out of turn about the venue portion?
No, we were looking at another part of the bill while you were talking. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay. But if you have any questions, I'm here to answer. I'm here to help. And this, I think, has been said before, this is a vital and an important discussion that needs to take place, and it's taking place in both chambers. The House has a bill as well. It's House Bill 986. It was heard by the Joint Committee of the Judiciary and I believe Science and Technology last week. And for an hour they discussed it, and they did not move it because they still had many questions unresolved. So it's encouraging to see both chambers taking up the same issue and talking about it, and I think this is a very important discussion to take place. But as on behalf of the prosecutors, please help us and guide us as to what you want the will to be done.
One question I have in looking at unintended consequences and the idea of someone creating something and just to share with their friend, we don't want them getting a felony conviction just for doing that. The language we have, I know you're not looking at the sub, but this language hasn't changed. Line 37, with the intent to deceive one or more electors for the purpose of, and there's two items below that, with the purpose being to reduce someone's chance to win an election or otherwise influencing an election or referendum. Is that language tight enough to not capture someone that does something almost like a prank to be funny that shows to a friend?
It really becomes one of those eye of the beholder. I mean, and that's one of the things to think about, is a lot of these things won't be known until after the election results are in. It hasn't been mentioned in this committee, but there was a presidential election for the country of Turkey where a deep fake was issued and put out within a couple of days of the presidential election that had an impact on the outcome. If a deep fake is, and that's one of the things that's important about this bill, a deep fake 91 days from an election date is not covered by this law. You can do as many deep fakes as you want to about your opponent 91 days ahead of an election, but not within 90 days of the election you can't. That's covered by the statute. So a lot of times, and by the way, this is an indictable offense as well. This is not an offense in which we can file an accusation on. So that means we'd have to go to, you would have, if you were find out about the deep fake, you'd have to call your local police, sheriff, or whoever to have an investigation. They would have to then get the investigation to one of the prosecutors, and then that prosecutor would have to have the grand jury meet. Some of you have counties where the grand jury meets once a week. Some of you have a grand jury that may meet once a month or once a term of court, which is several months. So if you don't happen to have a grand jury between the time of the deep fake and the election results, we couldn't prosecute it until after the election result, which could have some consequences.
Question from Senator Setzler.
Chairman raised a question. This is just, again, I think most of us here want to find a way to effectuate this policy and advance this. You mentioned out-of-state actors or even out-of-country actors. What would we do? I mean, I've had the pleasure of being part of an election where there are out-of-state people spending out-of-state money trying to take me out of my district. It's a joy, by the way, if you've never experienced that. So how would we address first out-of-state, in-country people in the United States, and then if there's a way to address the out-of-country, I don't know there's any real way to address it. How would we address Colorado PACs, Washington, D.C. based PACs, with entities in those states creating the content, serving on the internet, whether it comes, whatever means it works its way into Georgia to the ears and eyes of voters. How would we do that today?
One of the things you could do is how you've treated other crimes like child pornography and financial identity fraud. You've given us a very valuable tool with a venue statute that allows us to go after out-of-state actors when they prey upon our children, when they prey upon our vulnerable victims. So borrow the language from there if you want to.
So that would be anywhere that's viewed by somebody, in essence, or
wherever the person is. So basically, if you're the aggrieved party where you live, or where someone views it, you tighten the venue up that way if you wanted to. Or you could leave it open, and if you're in a statewide election, let the 50 DAs race to whoever can get the grand jury together fast enough to indict the case.
Is there any mechanism we have procedurally to tweak this so it doesn't have to go through the grand jury process, but is a more readily indictable issue?
You would have to go into a different code section to change what crimes can and cannot be indicted. In Georgia, there's a presumption that all felonies have to be indicted. I'm not calling for advocating either level of punishment. Just all felonies have to be indicted except for a certain list. You'd have to go in and change that list.
So how would this be treated differently if it were a misdemeanor?
It could be accused. It'd be prosecuted by the 66 counties that have solicitor generals. They would be prosecuting, and the rest of them would be handled by a DA. That could be drafted by an accusation.
So that could.
But then the maximum punishment is a $1,000 fine, 12 months in jail, or both.
So I'm just thinking out loud here, guys. So if you had, a misdemeanor offense per occurrence, and if it met, more than one was a felony, whatever, you could look at you could create a misdemeanor structure in this stack, I guess a lesser included of some kind, that you could prosecute right away and get immediate action on. Is there any meaningful value in that approach?
That's a policy decision that y'all would have to make a determination on. I would point out that of the 66 solicitors, 34 of them are part-time.
Yeah.
Which means they also probably appear in front of a part-time judge.
Well, I'm just asking the question. I know you don't want to delve into policy, but if it's a policy objective to get a quick bang out of it, to be able to interdict this, if there's a misdemeanor option in the step, then you're saying that's quicker to action?
No more quicker than a felony, because we also have due process rights that are guaranteed to all defendants. They're not guilty. They're entitled to motions. Yeah. They're entitled to trial by jury. All those rights, which those rights are sacred and need to be protected at all costs.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Smith? All right. Thank you. Chairman Albers, you want to come back up? I'll let you close out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, I appreciate everyone's questions and the speakers that came up. I know both California and Minnesota were referenced. Just to be candid, if I were going to pick states in order from which I'd like to pull legislative language from and laws, they probably would be number 49 and number 50 on my list, respectively, based on the current challenges that they face. Disclaimer sounds good, I understand. But people are still creating malicious content, basically stealing someone's identity, their looks, their talks, and their actions in order to deceive people. Whether you put a disclaimer on that or not, whether it's the biggest or the smallest disclaimer, they're still trying to influence and change the results of an election by using tools that are available. And that's just wrong no matter how you look at it, right? This is a crime. We do have a justice system, and I'm confident if somebody is doing something that is not nefarious, then we have a system for that, as Robert just mentioned, and why PAC's input is so important. The venue statute, that might have some legs on it. We might want to consider adding that. I'm perfectly comfortable with that being the case. But let's get back to what this really is, and this is real time. This is going to happen in this election cycle as we have never seen it before. It's going to be way bigger than the first time people used social media the first time in an election cycle. This will take it to a level that we are not well equipped or prepared for. Now, it's like any other crime now. You can't always prevent crime from happening. We can put laws in place, we can help educate, we can hopefully work with different partners, but the reality is if somebody's going to break the law, then we're going to have to follow the criminal justice system in order to have them go through their rights, as Robert just mentioned. That being said, if something's not illegal, you better believe people who are on that moral, ethical edge are going to use that to their perverted advantage. And we do not want that. And just to remind everybody, we have a presidential preference primary in less than 2 months, a general primary in less than 4. There'll be runoffs and then the full presidential election in November. We want to act in a way that's consistent and good. I think we struck a really good balance. We put the injunctive relief in there very intentionally. We put the different pieces of the bill together. I'd be happy to explore the venue addition if we think that's adequate, but I think this is a good start, and I think we want to move forward with something to protect the election process.
All right, thank you, Chairman Albers. We're going to hold on taking action today. I would like for us to look at the venue part. For me, I think the misdemeanor, breaking it down to have a misdemeanor built in, may be something that would have value as well. You can talk to other members. I don't know if personally the disclosure part matters to me personally as much, but I think we could do maybe a little better job of breaking up the offense when it comes to felony versus misdemeanor. There's also, just before I forget, line 49, Ledge Council had a suggestion, if we're going to leave that language as it is, that I'll give you, that's just more standard language we use for felony convictions. And also, I earned my pay the day, line 40, that comma should be a period at the end. That was your chairman that caught that. I didn't catch anything else, but I caught that. But with that, we will, Senator Sessler, do you?
One quick thing, Mr.
Yes, sir.
If we're making some tweaks, I just friendly suggestion on line 57. And I like the people that have got an opportunity for injunctive relief. Any organization that represents the interest of voters. I mean, would you want to pare that down? Any organization, reference a code section, whether it's a political organization or something? I mean, any organization could be a homeowners association could assert they represent their homeowners. You may want to pare that down to a little bit more appropriately defined group. I'll leave that to you. Just something to think about.
And I appreciate, by the way, Mr. Chairman, your feedback, and Chairman Setzler, my only concern with that is that will be another loophole that someone will use in order to still get their messaging out that is not true.
I just think you could even have any organization that says, hey, organization is, I think, I think it's an undefined term here. I just want to make sure we have some definition of what that means. Anyone could assert a group of, grumpy old guys who get together at Chick-fil-A and have coffee every morning. And we're an organization we've been meeting here every day for.
I'll see you at 7 a.m.
Yeah. So just suggest you define that somehow.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman Albers. We have one last bill on the agenda. Representative Mathiak, House Bill 166. This was a bill we took up last year. My memory says it only affects one county in the state. There is a substitute that we're working off of, and I'm not clear whether or not you have that substitute, but it cleans up two things I'll mention. LC 491712S, is that the substitute you have?
I do not.
So the substitute simply cleans up the effective date. Well, the date, it'll apply to a constable taking office on line 12.
Yes.
And it also changes the language on line 16 and 17 for a high school diploma as we use in the code versus I think you had GED before.
Actually, what I have has high school diploma or general education development diploma.
So now this one.
Thank you, sir.
Even better, you'll see that language just cleaned up, not a substantive change. But with that,
good.
I will turn the floor over to you.
What this bill does is it was brought to me by my magistrate judge. She still uses constables, and that's what this did. It helped her be able to broaden her pool of people. It narrowed it down to just Spalding County, and this opens it up so that she can hire from within the judicial district, is basically what this did.
All right, how many counties are still using constables, do you know?
I don't know.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's very, very few.
Yeah.
Very few.
What is a
Did you
constable?
know?
Smoking the Bandit?
It's the same thing. Ledge Council, Michael, do you want to weigh in on what I'm bringing up as far as the counties that still use constables and give us or Patrick, So this is in small claims court, magistrate court, and these are associate judges that
Exactly.
are brought in to help hear these matters in a very limited jurisdiction court. Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's my understanding, I'm not an attorney, my understanding is her constable delivers papers to the citizen that may be before her in court. It's small claims court, yes.
Michael looks like he's ready to
Does he?
lifeline. Ledge Council. Maybe. He's live.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman, for not having a better answer ready. It looks like all the references to constable in the code seem to be aimed at service of process. So really more doing what a sheriff would do, more so than a magistrate or any other member of the bench.
Is it all clear now? Well, perhaps. Do you have a question? No question. Any questions from the committee? My memory of the bill last year was that Spalding County is the only county that was still using constables, and that's the reason I said it's the only county I believe this impacted. You brought it kind of almost like it was a local bill, but it had to be a general bill because it is something in the code.
It was code, exactly.
Any questions from the committee? No one signed up to speak on the bill. Dr. Watson, what's the pleasure of the committee?
I'd like to make a motion to do pass.
Yes.
Do pass by committee substitute from Senator Watson. Do we have a second? Second from Senator Jones. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. It is unanimous, and Senator Watson's carrying it to the floor. That disclaimer may help you in the well.
Thank you. Gentlemen, I thank you from the bottom of my heart because my judge is just, she's texting me like crazy right now, so she knew I was here today, so thank you so much.
You got it out of the house and you don't know what a constable is or what county has them. And you're not
Well,
lawyer.
it was, I knew it was very minimal, Senator. I knew that it was very.
You haven't met Karen Mathiak, have you? All right, with that, that's all of our business. Unanimous passage. And Dr. Watson, bringing it, I think, tomorrow to the floor already. I heard rules is about to meet. All right.
Thank you.
With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.